Well, I'm getting much needed sun and vitamin D. And I've said this, so anyone who knows me in the past would have known me to have always been darker skinned. And that shows how little sun I've had since 2014. Last time I actually had sunlight was around, like good sunlight, was around 2014, which is bad. But then a lot of health things happened after 2014. That's all I can say. Um, so yeah, I used to always make sure, like my skin was even dark in winter, because I was always tanning, or whatever. Well, my skin is naturally got. It's white if I don't get. Well, no, it's not dark like my grandfather's. That's for sure. But it is, does go darker, easy. But anyway, that's not what I was doing this video for. So, well, I'm getting some sunlight. I thought, oh well, I'll do this regarding family history again because there was gathering information that even come from my mother. So let me tell you, when it comes to family history, I can give you the outline like I've always done. And there's been, I can go back 24 years ago when I had people say, oh, sunlight's in my face there. Oh, but how come you look the way you do? And I'm just going to nip it in the bud there and say, so my dad's father, Stanley Fleming, was an orphan, but his name's Stanley Fleming. So even though he was never adopted, okay, he was raised by Edith Kavanagh in Botany Bay. He didn't know his parents, so he doesn't know what nationality his parents are. And his brother-in-law, which is George Hill, so my Nana Ruby's brother, George Hill, told me when he was staying with me, like Dad and Uncle George stayed with me and Giovanni in Surrey Hills, he said, for what he knows of the situation, because it's very close to his sister, because Uncle George was gay, and he was close to his sister Ruby, and then Ruby's husband. He told me how they met and everything, and he said, your pop, he said, I'll tell you now that Edith Kavanagh, because Uncle George knew Edith Kavanagh, she was a spinster who raised ethnic orphan boys, and he assumed that it was from the boats coming to Australia from Europe and so forth. He said in those days, he said, your pop, he said, used to joke and say he's a year younger than your nan, but in actual fact we think he was older than your nan, but we don't know because no one knows his birthday, when he was born, or anything. The documents in Australia says country is unknown, so he's unknown country, unknown birthplace, so they don't know where he came from, and that's a fact. So yes, we did sit around on my dad. So we have all said this. Look, Meredith, my cousin, she has the dark olive skin that came from my pop. She's also got my Nana Ruby blue eyes, and yeah. So we did say this. That's right. So we've sat back and all said, oh, it could have been Italian, could have been Maltese, could have been Lebanese, could have been Greek. When you look at Alexandra, we don't know, but this is why we throw these ethnic looks. So the ethnic look isn't done deliberately. It is because of DNA that comes from my dad's father. So can we just nip that in the bud? Because in the last 9 years I've had people say personality disorder and so forth, and it's like, no, it isn't. I can't help it. And my cousins that look Lebanese and Italian and Greek, and that can't help it. And I find it to be very discriminative that it was twisted to be personality disorder when it's not. That's one thing. So the other thing is, yes, then if you look in my family, so you go to dad's side. So my cousin Jessica, which is my aunt Linda and Uncle Tony's daughter. So she dated Haysam for a very long time, Islamic guy. So they're all from Islamic, Arabic areas. And then they separated, and then she got with Chris, who's a Brazilian guy, and had a daughter to Chris. So this is why I've actually turned even immigration in the past and said, okay, so Liliana, my second cousin, is part Brazilian. So it's very mixed. So I'm actually saying this as a positive, not for personality disorder, which is what it's been taken as. I'm saying this as a positive to say that my family is very accepting of multiculturalism. And this is twisted around. So I'm trying to explain this with immigration. So we're extremely multicultural, where Jessica Pincham, her father is Tony Pincham. And I turned around and said, okay, Uncle Tony Pincham, his cousin, so Vince from Maryland, he's Italian. So Uncle Tony's cousins in Maryland, so his blood cousins, they're half Italian. His wife is my dad's younger sister, which is Linda Fleming. Their daughter, so Christy Pincham, married John Saruni. Their children are part Lebanese. So you've got Lebanese with Christy Saruni. You've got part Brazilian with Jessica, so with Liliana. So you've got, with Jaden, Connor, and Addison, they're Lebanese, so part Lebanese, mixed. And the same with then Liliana, who's part Brazilian. So I was saying this as a positive, and I said, okay, Tony, my Uncle Tony, his cousins are Italian. So that's where I was just sort of saying there, okay, so this is where you'll see the multiculturalism. A lot of multiculturalism through my family. And I was saying it as a positive, and then it got twisted around to be personality disorder. I'm like, there's not personality disorder. What I'm stating is the truth, but I'm saying this to be a positive for my family. So I was actually saying this to be a positive for my family, which is really annoying that my family ended up being the ones that attacked me, funny enough. And I'm there going, well, I'm actually stating these facts to say positive things, and you've attacked me, which makes you, my entire family on both sides, look narcissist, because I've said something that's very positive, and to say that we're inclusive. So I'm was making statements that it's truthful to my family how inclusive they are to everybody, including homosexuals. And that's why I've been openly gay since a kid. And it got twisted around to be something that wasn't. And like I said, on my mother's side of the family, so my mother's younger sister, Mary Ann Purdy, her husband's Richard Mihowski. So, got married, and her name's Mihowski now. So Mary Ann Mihowski. My cousin Bradley, Luke, and Hayden. So their father is Polish, but his grandfather's Polish, his grandmother's Russian, his other auntie, Nadia Mihowski, is Macedonian. So this is where I was saying, well, my family is extremely multicultural and inclusive. That shouldn't be twisted around and be personality disorder. That should be seen and viewed as what it is. It goes, well, Justin does have a lot of mixed nationalities within his family. Yes, I do. And that's exactly what it should be seen as. And it should not have ever been taken as something that was sinister, and 9 years has been set back as something the most extreme sinister. Because then I've turned around to them and said, okay, well, the English and Irish side. So let me tell you where the family heritage, so my blood comes from them. So I've told you all this information, so where my blood, and I've even said to immigration, okay, like I know it, well, I haven't used Italian since 2007, but I learned Italian in the 90s, and I used to be able to speak it well enough. Okay, so I'm going to actually pin that for a sec, because in 2016, some information was said that I must have copied Sam Delati or some other people. No, I didn't. And I'll make it perfectly clear as well that, because a boss, Tony Pacello, who hasn't worked at Star Casino since 2003, but I was close to when he worked there. I had coffee with him yesterday, and he said something. He goes, oh, your friend Sam. I was like, well, no, we're exes. We're exes. Because Sam Delati, I didn't know until, I'll tell you, the fact is, so I started work at I got the job at Star Casino in the year 2000, and I couldn't start until 2001 because I had other commitments, and I had to go through the process of getting my gaming license first anyway, so I couldn't start without the gaming license. Then when I got the gaming license, I was in America, so when I came back, I started in March 2001. I never knew Sam until the finale of, and this is how I remember it, when I first met him, it was just before the ending of Big Brother, the first Big Brother, and he was having a finale party at his place, and I got invited. That's how I first met him. So that would have been around August 2001. Yep. Because it was about 6 months after I was working at Star Casino about 6 months before I met Sam Delati. Anyway, then we dated towards the end of the year in 2001, and I left him before my grandfather passed away. And my grandfather, Reginald George Purdy, passed away in Concord Hospital in November 2002. So that's it. And I've had very little to do with him since 2003. There we go. Leave it as that. I'm not saying that anything negative. I'm just stating facts and timelines here, because that's what I like to work with, facts and timelines, not hearsay. And there's a lot of hearsay for 9 years of people that have said comments. I'm like, yeah, but they don't really know me. Especially they start turning around saying, oh, I've met his mother and I've met his half sister on his mother's second husband's side. It's like, but then they don't know me. So then the facts are, so with the timeline, so I can go right back over 100 years, because I was very close to and raised and reared by my mum's parents. So Lola May Keegan is my nan's maiden name, and is my nan's mother. and her father is Reginald George Purdy. Now, my nan's is not a straight line of where they've lived. So let me start with Lola May Keegan first. So Lola's born in Wellington of New South Wales. That's where the racing industry was, because her father was a jockey, but her mother, which is Mary Sayer, Mary Ann Sayer, was a dressmaker seamstress. Her father is Arthur William something Keegan. He's got two middle names. So grandfather Keegan was a jockey. Now, grandfather Keegan's where the Irish side comes in, Sayers where the English side comes in, but I can go back further than that. And this is my mother's side. So when he broke his back, they moved back to Sydney. And because I asked Nan this, and she goes, oh, well, because I said, well, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm born in Wellington, but Justin, I don't know anything about Wellington. I live my life out in Leichhardt, basically. So, Nan was saying, she was only a little girl when they moved into the house in Leichhardt that was owned by Uncle Fred. So Uncle Fred's real name's Leo Patrick Sayer. Like I said, it gets confusing. Leo Patrick Sayer. My nan's mother and her husband lived in that house and raised their family in that house. And that was my nana Lola, her sister Mari. So Mari Keegan, Lola Keegan, Brian Keegan, and Eddie Keegan. I remember Uncle Eddie when he used to live up on the Central Coast with Auntie Jill, and that was in Norah Heads. So I lived near the Rockpool in Norah Heads. I haven't really had much to do with him since Nan passed away, since Nan met him, Big Nan. And then he passed away back in 20... Oh, hang on. He would have passed away in 2015, I think, Uncle Ed. Anyway, Nan's brother. So that's how that goes. So they're all from Leichhardt. So it's 43 Piper Street, Leichhardt. And Nan's was saying, look, all her family were from the inner city of Sydney, but they all had racehorses. She goes, Justin, we had horses in Sydney. Nan's niece, which is mum's cousin, so Sharon Newcomb, her husband's Chick Newcomb. Well, I don't know what Chick's real name is. I thought her name was Chick. Sharon Chick Newcomb. Anyway, Sharon said her mother, Mari, so Murray Keegan, used to keep her racehorse across the road there in Piper Street, in the city, in the city. And because I said to Nan, because Nan was always talking, she goes, oh, we've all had horses growing up, Justin. And I said, but you said, Annie Williams is from Bellevue Hill. She goes, yeah, she's from Bellevue Hill. That's where I used to go and visit my cousin Gary, because Nan used to get the sheep. I'm like, you question, I'm like, well, you said this. I said, well, where does she have the horses there? She goes, she had them in Randwick. I was like, oh, okay. And I don't know the facts. All I know is that when Margaret Keegan, which is Nan's sister-in-law, passed away at the end of, must have been October 2003, at the wake, which was near Birkenhead Point, with Margaret's sister and so forth, Tess. So I was at the wake, and Nan introduced me. She goes, this is my cousin Gary, who, like, Nan used to love going to the house. She used to call it her grandmother's house, but it's actually her grandmother's sister's house. We do. So Nan used to say, I used to go catch the tram from Leichhardt to go to see my grandmother, my grandmother's place in Bellevue Hill, and I love that house. And it wasn't her grandmother's house, it was her grandmother's sister's house, but that's how they talk. So it was actually Annie Williams' house, and Tommy Williams is Annie's son, and Gary Williams. So the Williams on my mother's side. There's Williams on both sides of the family. So different. They're not related. There's different Williams. So at the wake, I'm talking to Gary Williams, and Gary said, like, because Nan's like, tell Justin about the house. That's exactly how Nan used to talk. Tell him about the house. Because Nan loved this house, and Gary's like, I was too big to mention my own, so I sold it. And he lived his life out in Bondi, because he's from the area. So he's from the eastern suburbs area, that side of Nan's family. So all this is true. Like, that's where Nan's side of the family is from. And I can give the full history and everything. And Uncle Fred, Leo Patrick Sayer, was from Bellevue Hill, because even he brought it up when he was alive, when I was having discussions with him, or to do with his photography work, basically. And then when he was making a comment, I thought he was talking about the house in Leichhardt. He said, not the house in Leichhardt, because I wasn't living in Leichhardt. He goes, where your nans lived. I didn't move to Leichhardt till I was old. I was like, oh. I said, where? He goes, in Bellevue Hill. So he lived down the road from Tommy, from his auntie's house. I was like, oh, where? Anyway, I forgot the address, but it's 33 Edgecliff Road. So anyway, Yeah, that's where Leo Patrick Sayer lived. So my great uncle. So I was close to my great uncle growing up. So then if I want to go with all that family tree, I can go right back to Nan's great grandmother, because I know as far back to Nan's great grandmother, and Nan said I don't know any further than that, because Nan knew her great grandmother growing up and adored her great grandmother Bridget growing up, and she goes, I don't know further than that because Bridget's French. That's what she said. So I don't know where she's, we don't know where where she's born. So it's Bridget Dufresne, and her husband was Irish. So French married an Irishman. And this was brought up in the 90s and I've made this very clear, and I'll make it clear again. In the 90s, France did nuclear test him. And I remember it was on the news, and I was at Nan and Pop's, and Pop turned to Nan and said, well, you want to stop telling people you're French, Lola? That's what he said. That was in the 90s. And he's like, oh, rubbish, Reg. That's how they used to talk to each other. Like, oh, shut up. And it's to do with Nan's great-grandmother being French. So, and it's on documents anyway. Like, my mother disputed it and carried on with the way she did. It's like, my nan, your mother hated you. Like, I'm the one that was close to my nan, Lola, and very close to my nan's mother, Mary, and very close to my nan's uncle, Leo. And that's who gave me the information. And I've got the documents to prove it. So instead of gaslighting me, let's just go off the documents. Like, I love how these women started trouble once all the people who gave me the information were dead. They didn't question it before they were dead. And I've turned around to people and said, isn't it funny how Carol didn't cause the trouble until the person's dead? Isn't it funny how none of this was brought up until the person's dead? So now Lola's dead, she can't stand up and say, well, I did tell Justin this, and here's the documents. And they didn't even argue it when Reg was alive. Either. And I was like, you fucking losers. Anyway, so it goes Bridget Dufresne. So Bridget Dufresne, Nan's great-grandmother. Matthew Joseph Ryan. So French, married Irish. So here's the tree of my nan's side. And then they had 3 daughters. So they had Julia Ryan, May Ryan, who had Uncle Fred first, which is why his name was Fred first. So he was Frederick. And then Julia Ryan adopted Uncle Fred. So May had him first, one of the sisters. Then the other sister adopted him, and he became Leo Patrick Sayer and dropped the Frederick. So, okay, I know family history is confusing, but I know all the information. My sister knows nothing because she was never with the family. She's always trapped by our mother's bubble. So it went Julia Ryan, May Ryan, and Annie Ryan. Now, Julia Ryan married an Englishman, and that was George Gurley Sayer. Gurley, I think his middle name was George Gurley Sayer. He was actually from England, so I don't think there's any background from him because his whole family was in England. I was told by Mum's cousin that before they got married, Julia actually went to England to meet his family, and then they come back to Australia and got married. But anyway, and that's Nan's grandparents. So my Nana Lola's grandparents is Julia Ryan and George Sayer. All right. Then Julia's sister, which is Mad Auntie May. So Mad Auntie May, and I used to say to Nan, I was like, what, because why do you call her, because my Nan called her Mad Auntie May. And because she goes, well, because she was loaded. She was rich. And because Nan used to always say her side of the family is rich. Like my Nana's side of the family was rich. Your grandfather, your Reg side of the family is poor. And unfortunately, Justin, I married a poor man, which means we're poor. But my side of the family is rich. And that's how they were. She goes, but it comes down to who you marry, basically. And that's what Nan used to say. And that's exactly, it almost sounded exactly like Nan saying it. So Mad Auntie May was loaded, and it was a rumor like Nan goes, oh, she killed all her husbands. I said, did she, Nan? She goes, well, put it this way. They were all very rich, and they were all very old, and they all died. So Mad Auntie May never had any children. So as soon as one of her husbands died, she gave Uncle Fred up for adoption. And her sister adopted Uncle Fred, and he became Leo Patrick Sayer. And then there was Annie. So Annie Ryan married a Williams, but Nan said she had another name as well, Shawkner. So it's Annie Williams Shawkner. But Tommy's from a Williams, so it goes, so Annie Williams Shawkner. Then you've got her son, Tommy Williams, and she only had the one son who lived with her. Don't know what happened to Tommy's wife. And he had the one son, which is Gary Williams, which is Nan's cousin. And Nan used to say, I used to go to Bellevue Hill all the time to visit them growing up. So we lived in Leichhardt, they lived in Bellevue Hill. So there's Nan's family. Right. And then, of course, from Nan's grandmother, so from Julia Ryan and George Sayer, you've got my great-grandmother. So you've got, oh God, there's a massive big family. but you have so Mary Ann Sayer. Of course, you got, so they're the only ones I knew. Oh, hang on, no, Jack as well. So you've got Mary Ann Sayer, you've got Uncle Fred, who's Leo Patrick Sayer, you've got Matthew John Sayer, who lived his life out in Strathfield, and he passed away when I was about 14. So I used to call him, well, apparently I used to call him Auntie Jack, but I don't remember. I used to call him Uncle Jack because everyone called him Jack, but his name was Matthew John Sayer. So I knew those three really well growing up. Of course, Uncle Fred passed away when I was in my 20s, and I used to go and visit him every Tuesday. So every single Tuesday I used to go and visit Uncle Fred. And then, of course, my great-grandmother, who I was very close to growing up, who passed when I was still almost an adult. So Mary married Arthur Keegan and had, Lola, my grandmother. There, that's that side done. Then there is Reginald George Purdy. Well, Reginald George, this is easy because Reg Purdy, my mum's father, his father's Keith Purdy. They're all from Balmain. So it's simple. So it goes Reginald George Purdy, Keith Charles Purdy, and I think Pop's grandfather was Charles Purdy, something like that as well. And then his uncle was Stephen Purdy. But they're all from Balmain, Balmain, Rozelle area. Like when my mum was born, they were still living in Mansfield Street, Rozelle, so 90 Mansfield Street, Rozelle. So Reginald George Purdy, his mother's Lillian Steele, which is my mum's other grandmother. So Pop said, so I was asking about Lillian. So I know when Amanda and I were born and we went into the RPA, and then Amanda went to a children's hospital there in Camperdown, Lillian was still living in Newtown because they're all from the inner city. But Pop said she's from Paddington. Her side of the family is from Paddington. Like, he wasn't really close to his mother's side of the family, or his father. His older brother, so Raymond Purdy passed away when he was in his 30s. They had Raymond Jr. and Gary Purdy, and I can't remember Pop, the other ones, but I know Uncle Raymond and Gary Purdy. Gary Purdy's one that was involved with Roger Rogerson in King's Cross. Then you've got Pop, Reginald George Purdy's sister, which is Valerie Purdy, but she married in Evans, and I think her daughter was Lynette, from memory. Anyway, yeah. So I know all that side of things, so where they're from and so forth. Like, Pop's grandfather, Pop's father, and Pop are all born and raised in the Balmain Rozelle area. So then when we go to my dad's side, so Mark Ian Fleming's side of the family, you go to his parents. So as I said, Stanley Fleming, there. That's it. It goes Stanley Fleming, and he was raised by Edith Kavanagh in Botany Bay. So there's no history after Stanley Fleming. But then you go to Dad's mother, which is Ruby Jean Hill. And Ruby Jean Hill's mother is Ada Gray, and she's from Abbotsford. And her parents were married in Woollahra. And you've got Frank Edward Hill. Well, Frank Edward Hill, and he's the one that looks German. Frank Edward Hill, he's actually born in Dunedin, New Zealand. But his parents Frank Edward Hill's parents are from London and Southampton in England. So that's my dad's great-grandparents. So my dad's great-grandparents. So I've got all the documents. And that's the thing. From being around all my family members, which my twin sister was never, she was always trapped under my mum's bubble. She wasn't not aware of anything to do with the family because she's always with my mother. Where difference with me, I'm with my dad. I'm with like my dad's mother Ruby. Even when family members didn't speak to my dad's mother Ruby anymore, I used to still go up there and have hot lunch with her on the Central Coast at Long Beach, right up till she died. She died in October 2007. I used to always see my dad's mother Ruby. Anyway, so Ruby's father, Frank Edward Hill, going off Uncle George, so Ruby's brother, they moved from Dunedin, New Zealand to Sydney, Woollahra when he was still a young man, which is why he was married in Woollahra. So he got married in Woollahra because that's where he ended up moving to from Dunedin. So I can give a really good detailed timeline of the family and who I'm related to and why there's ethnic and so forth throughout the family when I was saying this. Like, and even when it comes to knowing languages, like, you know, like I said, like, so Roman Catholic religion back in the 80s, like St. Aidan's in Rooty Hill, because from Sydney. And, you know, Latin was taught. Then when my mother moved, we went to a different area to live, and I went to a different high school there. We did French for years 7 and 8. Italian I started learning in 1995. Like all this can be backed up. So these are reasons why. So I've said, and then even my mother, Carol Ann Purdy, her grandmother, which is Mary Ann Keegan, nee Sayer, and her uncle Fred, which is Leo Patrick Sayer, took my mother to see Lay Girls in King's Cross when my mother was 16. And that's what I've said. So exposure to family and family heritage and history and so forth. So I was saying this as a positive, and then got twisted around the last 9 years. It's the most ridiculous bullshit I've ever heard in my entire life. Yet what I said was the truth. So, yeah. I mean, that's all the facts. I mean, I can even go deeper. It's like, well, if someone asked me a question and said, okay, well, that family member. I'm like, well, I can tell you. It's like, why do I know? It's because I wasn't with my mother much at all. I was with my Nana Lola, I was with my great-grandmother Mary, I was with my great-uncle Fred, which is Leo. I was with my dad. Look, my dad's father passed away when I was 8, but remember him well. I was with Ruby, Dad's, you know, like even when Dad didn't speak to Ruby after like the argument in the family, I still did. I still went and saw. I was with Dad, Mark Fleming. I was with Ruby Fleming. You know, I was with Reg Purdy, my grandfather. I was, you know, then kept in touch with cousins on Dad's side. Like there's a divide in my dad's side. There's a divide in all the families, and one family doesn't speak to another family, but I spoke to everybody. So I know. Like I said, Uncle George, my nan's brother, he had to go in for an eye surgery at St. Vincent's, and Dad was in Sydney, and they came and stayed with me and Gio in Surrey Hills, and I'm sitting up all night picking all the family history going, well, I know this, Uncle George, but what happened here? And he goes, I'll tell you. So Uncle George Hill, Ruby Hill, well, Ruby Fleming's brother, was telling me more. He goes, and this is it, and I've got the documents. So, you know, I like to know who's got them now. Probably one of the cousins. I don't know if Dad's got them. So that's all the history. Like, it is a mixed history. And like I've said this like over 20 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, but what I said was true. This is so weird that I got brought up into something sinister in the last 9 years. There must be, look, the world's fucked up. To have turned something that's facts and then to gaslight me and then to go personality disorder, some other bullshit. Oh, my hairdresser did it. I kid you not, my hairdresser okay, I'm going to finish it off by saying this because this is really weird, and I'll leave it there. You go to a business. Okay, you go to a business and you get a service and you pay for that service. That person who's providing that service has no legal right to know anything about you at all. My hairdresser thought otherwise. So in late 2013, I go to my hairdresser, Belinda Jeffries. Late 2013 is when I first met her. So I go to a hairdressing salon, called La Boutique, because I needed a new haircut and treatment because my hair was badly damaged. Actually, it's grown out healthy now. I found a really good barber. I had a really good haircut, and you can tell when you get, like, the thing is, when you get a bad haircut, it shows. Your hair looks like shit. I mean, your hair could look thin, crappy. Like, I've had bad haircuts, and it's hard to find someone that's good at it, really, especially when you've got long hair, to cut it without cutting it. Like, I've had people chop it right back up here on the top, so they've cut it short on top and left it long at the back, like this old school short long thing. I'm like, what have you done? So to find a good hairdresser, and it looks terrible, like when they do that. And I've had it straightened and so forth. I've had it chemically straightened in the past. So I had eczema from my scalp, so I've used eczema creams. So the damage to the hair was really bad. Like, it was bad because the compounding cream, the tar cream, the emulsifying creams, the bleach creams that you put in your scalp for the sores, and when you have bad eczema and psoriasis, the straightening and all the damage and so forth. Anyway, so late 2013, go to this place, La Boutique, to get a haircut and treatment. And I've always been, talkative to my hairdressers, even when I had an Oak hairdressing salon back in Balmain. To catch up with Anthony, who was the owner there, every so often. But that doesn't mean we're friends or whatever. It just means that I'm socialising with my hairdresser. Anyway. So late 2013, I meet this Belinda Jeffries, and then she's trying to find out all this stuff. She's always like, "Oh, who are you?" It's like, well, Justin, like it's none of your business type thing. Like I'm someone that goes and get a haircut and like it was really none of a business. Like seriously, when you've got people that have known you for 20 years that don't know much about you, which I keep that, and I've always been very reserved like that. Especially like so, there's no one from my high school that could know anything about me, except for what they've guessed or what they've assumed. No one from my ex-employment that would know anything about me because I used to go to work to my job. Even a guy I dated, like with Sam Delati, when we were briefly, it's like you don't know anything about me. Because I keep my life this way, where I go to work and it stops people being able to involve themselves. That means any information has to come directly from me. It stops information being spread. Like so, there is no. And I've pride myself back years ago saying this that well, it didn't come from me. Like I'm going back 20 years. I'm like, well, that's not true. Oh, but we thought. It's like, well, you thought, so you assumed, so you made an ass of yourself. I never said that. And that's the thing, I don't. So because I don't give too much information, you're digging to try and find out and you're just going to get it wrong. And I've always been like that. So you can go back to 2001 at Star Casino. There is nobody I worked with that know anything about me at all because they still focus on where my mother moved to with a second husband. And as soon as someone brings up where my mother moved to with a second husband, I'm like, they don't know me at all. Because my mother moved in April 1989 with her second husband to an area that we had no friends and no family and we're not from. And people who don't know me always think I'm from that area. And I'm like, that's why I don't give too much information. So that way I can turn around to them and say, well, that person knows nothing about me at all. They think I'm from Tamworth. But here's the facts. And I do it deliberately. I've been doing it for years. Like I would go to work to my job and people would be guessing stuff to do with me. I'm like, oh, okay. It's not true. I've already, like, when they'll say something, I might just, give up a bit of information and say, oh, well, I, more preferred Nan's house in Leichhardt than anywhere else. And they're like, oh, we're in Leichhardt. Well, I can tell you, like 43 Piper Street, Leichhardt, because I used to go there a lot growing up. Nan sold it in 1999, but it's 43 Piper Street, Leichhardt, which was owned by Leo Patrick Sayer, Uncle Fred. But he left it to Nana Lola Purdy, and she sold it in 1999. Anyway. So I used to really pride myself on making sure that only information would come directly from me. That way there's no misinterpretation because you've got it from me and nobody else. So there's no one, no one could speak up and say, oh, well, unless they've been with me. For example, Sam Delati, when I was at a Royal in 2002, he came and saw me ride at Sydney Royal, my thoroughbred hack. So it's like, well, okay, that person was with me at that date. They've witnessed that. So they know that information, but that's all they know. So it's like shutting the conversation down straight away. So it's like, okay, if you need to verify something, it's like, okay, Sam Delati was with me in April 2002. I was competing at Sydney National Olympic Park. He can confirm that. And it's like, there we go, end. That's it. You want to confirm that I competed and won my Mount Ryan Equipment English Gentleman's class in 2002? There. Sam Delati can confirm that he was there. That's it. No further discussion for anything else because that's what he knows because he witnessed it. Don't need to say, oh, Justin's family, where's this? Do you know anything further? No. What else do you want? Tell me what other information you want. What my grandfather was. My grandfather was a butcher, but he also worked for PJ's Family Boats and for Ford Street just off Sunny Hot Rod in Blacktown. Jack of all trades, basically. His trade was a butcher. And I used to go to work with him when he used to rewire boats and so forth. Because he could rewire and so forth. What else? Like you can just ask. And that's the thing, 'cause I'm very straightforward like that. You ask a straightforward question, you're going to get straightforward answers from me. But when you play games and try to pry, you're going to get someone like myself that's going to play. It's like, oh, you're playing your little games. Like they did after 2015, these organisations that were trying to rally around friends and family. It's like, oh, you're playing your games. Oh, okay, well, I'll just play games back. So, and that's what I've always been. So, are you playing? I used to do it in high school. It's like, are you playing your little games? Like when the fuckwits in high school, it's like when they had these assumptions, like, oh, did you move here to have horses? It's like, no, we had a horse stud in Sydney, like in Rooter Hill. All my family had horses in Sydney. Like my grandfather had racing horses in Sydney, and they don't know because they're only from that area, so they don't have a brain because they're only from New England. They've never lived anywhere else, so they don't know what it's like outside of New England. They're not from Sydney or anything like this. And they don't have family that are from there either. So they're born in New England, their parents are born in New England, their grandparents are born in New England, so that's all they know. Those areas, those country areas, country people. And they'll be like, oh, where'd you keep the horse on the roof? I'm like, yes, we kept the horse on the roof. Yeah. You idiots. Like, and that's how I used to answer people. It's like, you're playing games, you look stupid. You know, if you want facts, ask me. It's like, yes, Reginald George Purdy had paces and trotters. Yes, he used to keep his horse in Balmain. That's true. Pop, he's out of his own mouth said he used to ride his horse down where the ferry comes in Balmain. Different times back then. You know, they moved from Balmain Roselle area back in 1962, and the back half of the place in Kerry Road, Blacktown, was stables. The behind Kerry Road, Blacktown, where my mum or my grandparents moved to in 1962, that was horse stables. You know, we had horse stables there in Dunsmore Street, Ruddy Hill, of horses. So there's your facts. You know, it's like, I've told you your facts, and that's it. You play your games, good. You play your little gaslighting games, you play your little bullshit, you're going to get bullshit back from me. You're going to look like a fool. Because I'd walk off like I did in America. It's like, okay, immigration in America is idiots. I left didn't leave it. I left out the front of the condominium, Pop's pigeon racing photo, because they're boring people, immigrants. I find them boring. I'm so anti-immigration, because they're boring people that seem to have these boring lives with nothing to tell. They grew up like plebeians with nothing. And I find it very boring. I had a very interesting life, and I look at these people and I think, you're boring. I don't want anything to do with immigration. I find you extremely boring. You know, like a great thing, like even after Mum moved, so I had no issues where Mum moved to the area. Like I said, you know, every October went to pony camp, and I used to play polo cross. I never got to play polo cross any other time of the year because we had equestrian horses, which meant I had to do Royals and Nationals. I did show jumping as well, like, but not professionally, because we were more focused on hacking, like, you know, and so forth. So when I got to do, so every October when I got to do polo cross, I was like, okay, great. This is different to what I normally do, because we can't damage the good horses, you know. So I got to play polo cross every October, something that really cool to do. You know, playing polo cross. But every other holiday was spent back home in Sydney. So all of them except for October was back home in Sydney. And seriously, like, since going through the immigration bullshit, even in America, I'm looking at Americans going, oh God, you're boring. Your life is so boring. You don't have anything. There's nothing in your history. There's nothing in your background. There's nothing in your family's history. You did nothing except live in a plebeian neighborhood with a really dirty sort of like front yard, backyard. You had nothing like what I had. I find you boring. Like, seriously, like, so when I bring up and say, well, yeah, because, yeah, Pop was a butcher, like you say, and he raced horses, like, oh, I thought he was a butcher. It's like, he was a butcher, but he also raced horses, and he raced pigeons. Oh, I thought he raced horses. I'm like, yes, and he raced pigeons as well. It's like, oh my God, you people are the most plebeian people I've ever met in my entire life, and this is immigration, which is why I'm so anti-immigration. I'm looking at this going, well, you people are plebs. Everyone I've seen for immigration is a plebeian. You don't have any life. You've done nothing. You did nothing. You're so boring. I can't relate to you. You are so boring. Like I said. So anyway, Pop's pigeon racing photo, and I wanted it back, and these arseholes took it from the front of my building and wouldn't give it back because they didn't think that my grandfather Reginald George Purdy raced pigeons. And like, my mother should have helped me get it back and should have argued the point. It's like, thank you, you want to help? I want my grandfather's pigeon racing photo back, thank you very much. Some little plebeian, libertarian cunt stole it from out the front of my building. I want it back. Like, my grandfather raced pigeons, paces, trotters. Yeah, there was Shadow Sioux, Tarago Time. There's two of his horses I remember from the 80s when I was a kid. They raced at Harold Park Raceway. Shadow Sioux and Tarago Time raced in Harold Park Raceway. So, yeah. Mate, I look at these, seriously, I'm in New York and I'm talking to this person. I was talking about, you know, Pop. And Pop also used to fix harness gear. And they had a saddlery out the back of their place as well. Goodwood Saddlery, which was Stephen Thorogood. And I remember his mother, Mrs. Thorogood, going downstairs. That was in Broadway in Sydney. And then Pop used to get his horse gear from there and be selling it in Blacktown, out of Kerry Road. Everybody who knew the family knew this. And which is why I kept telling my mother, stop saying we grew up in Tamworth, because then you're a fucking idiot. I only lived there for 6 years. Because you're missing out on all the other heritage. Oh my God. So I'm like saying this in America, and you've got idiots that thought I was lying. I'm like, well, this is so pleb. I can't do immigration. I'm not renewing my green card. It's so pleb. It's like, you people are so boring. And that's why you look at my life and you think it's not real. Like, you're gaslighting. It's like, yeah, but it is true. But that's because you're like, I look at all immigrants now the same and go, wow, I'm sorry, but I can't lower my standards to be an immigrant. I'm not going to do it. America was enough for me. It was like, oh my fucking God, wow. Seriously, like, and that's it. Like, what I've said was the truth. There's the heritage and history, and that's it. And I look at immigration as like, I'm not lowering my standards to be part of immigration. Thank you very much. Because I find you to be a plebetarian and boring, really sort of scraping on the barrel, socialist, communist, liberal, libertarian, plebetarian people. Good luck to you. I don't want to be part of it. So, yeah, but every statement I've said, there's the facts, there's the truth.